Welcome back to Daybreak and to our 1-hour morning show.
Tonight,
seems like it just happened yesterday.
a community on edge.
That's exactly what happened to Jodi. She was happy and laughing one minute, and then the next minute, she was gone.
A morning show anchor abducted on her way to work.
Hey, we got a guy that's been bragging about Jodi Huisentruit in his cell.
20 years later, the case remains unsolved.
It hasn't advanced. The story hasn't advanced. The investigation hasn't advanced.
What really happened in the parking lot of this Iowa apartment complex? Was it the actions of a crazed fan?
I firmly believe it was a one-person job.
Did she know her abductor? From WOWT 6 News, for the next 30 minutes, Brian Mastre reports. Cold case. News anchor abducted.
Good evening, I'm Brian Mastre. This is where it all began for me, KIMT in Mason City, Iowa, my first job. 20 years ago, and I remember it like yesterday, a colleague here went missing. In the news business, we're taught, don't become the story. In this case, we had no choice. 20 years ago, you'd be hard-pressed to find much journalistic experience inside a small market television station. Many of us at KIMT were fresh out of college, eager to prove ourselves worthy of a promotion to a larger city. Well, this is a story that has In 1995, I anchored the evening newscasts in Mason City, Iowa. Jodi Huisentruit anchored the morning news. We crossed paths at work. She'd be going home as I arrived for my shift.
She had so much energy and enthusiasm, and every day was like a gift, one to explore and experience new things.
One of her best friends then was my 6 and 10 p.m. co-anchor, Robin Wolfram.
Sometimes, occasionally, this girl got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be like, what are you doing after work? It's like 10:30. I'm like, I'm going home, I'm going to bed. She's like, oh, Robin, there's plenty of time to sleep. Life is for the living, and she just embraced every single moment.
On June 27th, 1995, Jodi Huisentruit never made it to work.
A lot of times with police departments, if somebody comes up missing or they don't come home on time, they'll tell them to wait, 12 hours and then we'll take a missing person report. But this one, as soon as the officers got there and found what was on the scene, they knew something bad had happened.
Welcome back. Unlike today, in 1995, the local morning news ran from 6 to 7. When Jodi Huisentruit didn't show up on time, associate producer Amy Coons called her apartment. Jodi answered. She said she'd overslept, told her she would be right in. After all, the 27-year-old lived 5 minutes from work. The call came a little after 4 in the morning, less than 2 hours before airtime. Amy Coons is the only news person in the station. She's putting together the morning show herself. It gets to be 5:30, still no sign of Jodi, and no one's answering at her apartment now. The show must go on. Coons anchors the hour-long morning show instead of Jodi, figuring her coworker must have dozed off. When the show finished at 7 a.m. and there was still no sign of Jodi, a call was made to Mason City Police for a welfare check. No one was thinking foul play. Mason City Police quickly sealed the parking lot that Tuesday morning. There clearly had been a struggle near Jodi's red Mazda Miata. Her blow dryer, jewelry, red high heels scattered. It appeared she had been grabbed while putting the key in the car door.
Basically all of my free time I work on this case.
Officer Terrence Prohaska with the Mason City Police Department took over as lead investigator 5 years ago.
What caused her to sleep in that day? What caused her to answer the phone and rush into work? What was she doing on the night before? We all want to know the fine details. We know where she was at. We know she was golfing. We know that she had driven home and made a phone call to her friend. We know those are facts. We know, but it's that gray area in between that we don't understand.
Coming up.
Every time a new lead comes up and it's being pursued, you think, well, maybe this is it.
Law enforcement and news reporters from around the country converge on the community of 30,000 people.
I still remember all of the cards that they found in Jodi's apartment.
To uncover new clues, the family hires private investigators, including an Omaha man.
What do you think happened?
I've been asked that so many times.
And colleagues offer their suspicions. When Brian Mastre Reports continues.
The disappearance of television anchorwoman Jodi Huisentruit gained national attention. Not only was Mason City Police and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation on the case, but now the FBI became a partner in solving it. Every day, sometimes twice a day, Mason City's police chief took questions from a flurry of reporters this summer of 1995.
She was the darling of our family, you know, the baby.
Jodi's family from Minnesota spent weeks in Iowa, close to the investigation.
I couldn't have had a better kid sister, you know. She tried to motivate me all the time. Now, what are your goals for this coming year, you know? So I think of those things, and that makes me stronger. It's the worst. It's a nightmare. This not knowing where she is. We were hoping to find her within, you know, at least the first few months.
The community rallied. Volunteers flooded the area near the key apartments where Jodi Huisentruit lived. They made T-shirts, bumper stickers, buttons, anything to get the word out.
There have been bits and pieces here.
We wore ribbons of hope on the air. Many people who watched her on the news placed ribbons in their yards. Because of the attention, leads came in from everywhere. But none of the information ever led to a named suspect or an arrest, not in 1995 or at any time in the last 20 years.
If it was anybody but her, because she was a local news anchor, you know, you could say it could be a chance encounter, but you can't rule out the fact that maybe somebody was stalking her just because of who she was.
If you're a kidnapper, there's a lot of things that, a lot of possibilities there that were I guess I would say should have got caught. You know, you don't want to, in an apartment complex, there's a lot of windows facing you. There's a lot of things going on in apartment complexes where, what a risky place to try to abduct someone. So you think, man, maybe this was somebody that knew her. There again, what if it was just somebody just lurking around apartment complexes looking for any prey?
Investigators have interviewed hundreds of people over the years, and in 20 years, like we said, have never named a suspect.
The man in the monitor next to me thought...
Early on, they looked hard at the man who is believed to be the last known person to see Jodi Huisentruit alive. John Van Cise, the man in the monitor, was a friend of Jodi's. 20 years her senior, he named his boat after her. The night before she disappeared, they watched some of her birthday video together, and then Jodi went home to her apartment and made a phone call to a girlfriend. Do you think you've interviewed who did it?
I don't know. I don't know. You wonder.
Do you think this is a case where you know who did it, you just can't prove it?
I don't think so. There's so many different stories and theories and possibilities that I don't think we could ever narrow it down to who did it. I think right now it's trying to find what happened to Jodi, you know, where is she, and work backwards from there. But you know, we never close our eyes to anyone and try to narrow down to a suspect, because there's just no evidence to support just one person.
I hired Jodi. I brought her to Mason City. Could there have been something that we could have warned her about that we didn't talk to her about? I just don't know.
What do you think happened?
I've been asked that so many times, and I just feel as ignorant as the next person. I just don't know. I don't want to point fingers at anybody that you know, without looking at the investigation and opening up those books. I don't know. I think it had to be somebody that knew her. I think it had to be somebody that had an emotional response to something that Jodi said or did to cause them to do that. I don't think it was random, and I don't think it was planned. I think it was planned to a certain point, but not for days and weeks ahead of time.
Coming up.
Our news director and then our station manager called me into their office, and I immediately thought they found Jodi.
An eerie meeting just days after the disappearance.
Having an unsolved case sit on my lap all the time, it definitely wears on you.
How new science and technology could be the break investigators need. When Cold Case, news anchor Abducted continues.
difficult sometimes to get close, especially women who are in this industry, because you are always looking over your shoulder and saying, okay, is there somebody that's going to be coming up behind me? And I'll never forget the first day that Jodi walked in. You could hear her laugh, and that's something she'll always be remembered for. And I thought, oh, I think I like her. She's fun, she's spunky, she's got, you know, some zest, and she has such an energy for life and living.
You have a doozy of a time, let me tell you.
The case of Jodi Huisentruit, the 27-year-old news anchor who vanished on her way to work, touched not just Mason City and viewers of KIMT, as seen by the huge crowds of people who turned out to volunteer in the search, but the story reached beyond the local broadcast signal for a variety of reasons.
A lot of things struck me about the case.
Omaha private investigator Doug Jasa and his team started looking into the Huisentruit case early on. A Minnesota private eye hired by her family needed help.
He did not have the ability to work in Iowa. He did not have a private investigator's license that would allow him to work in Iowa.
Jasa did.
We're the private investigators that have been hired by the Huisentruit family. Can we ask you just a few questions?
His team spent weeks chasing leads.
You know, I still remember all of the cards that they found in Jodi's apartment. And there were birthday cards that, I think there was 50 of them. And we're just reading through them and reading through them and reading through them. You know, people had written very nice notes in the birthday cards.
Jodi had turned 27 earlier in the month.
I really, really wanted to work desperately on to try to help resolve it. We went door to door in the apartment complex, knocking on all the doors. Talking with different residences about what they may have heard.
The lady specifically remembers looking at her clock, knowing exactly what time it was when she heard the scream.
But to the frustration of many, no one called 911 after hearing the scream in the early hours of June 27, 1995.
And I can still see where the car was parked, and I can still see kind of where the drag marks ended up, and it would have been about 100 feet.
A white van became a key component to the investigation. Flyers went up urging the public to be on the lookout. Here's why.
By the key apartments here, and there was a white van parked there, had its parking lights on.
Is that where Jodi Huisentruit was dragged? To a white van parked in front of her apartment? Do you think in our lifetimes we'll find what happened to her?
No. I don't think so.
Why?
I firmly believe that Jodi's body was more than likely put into a deep hole somewhere not too far from Mason City.
In 2001, the courts declared Jodi Huisentruit legally dead, 6 years after her disappearance.
We were really close.
Jodi's best friend at work lives with the images of reporting the story then.
Late tonight, they dredged the Winnebago River behind Jodi's apartment.
And at the same time dealing with a personal loss.
That transition of still holding out hope and yet finally putting her to rest, in my mind, is what helped bring me a lot of peace and comfort. I think about this so much, Brian. Even 20 years later, I still, because every once in a while they have a special on. And so every time that happens, I think back and think, was there something that I could have seen as her friend? Is there something I should have recognized? Should I have asked her more questions about really what was going on in her life?
Wolfram, who left KIMT a few months after Jodi disappeared.
I try and remember all the good times and the hearts that Jodi touched. Not a day goes by that I don't think of her.
She still vividly remembers being called into a meeting with the station bosses, along with state, federal, and local investigators.
And I immediately thought they found Jodi, because I thought, why would all these people be in this office and inviting me in except to maybe share with me this information? But it was that there was talk on the internet, chat rooms. He claimed that he knew who had abducted Jodi, and he was going into detail and some gruesome detail that they shared with me. But the reason why they brought me in was because they said the last thing he communicated was plans are in the works for Robin Wolfram, she's next. And so from that point forward, I had a police escort at home at night. I think I used to look at life through rose-colored glasses all of the time, and that everybody was good, and that everybody had a pure heart, like Jodi, you know? And I think it was the realization that evil exists right next door to good. It's almost like a veil that exists, and you just have to kind of reach your hand across to experience it, and then reach your hand back not to experience it. But sometimes it's not that easy.
Coming up,
It just drags up a lot of stuff. You file it away.
the struggles of living with uncertainty for 20 years,
That's a very difficult question to answer, Brian.
and where the lead investigator sees the case headed. When Brian Mastre Reports continues.
This is the KIMT newsroom. It hasn't really changed much since I was here 20 years ago. A lot of new faces, however. There are only 4 employees that are here that were working back in 1995, and here in the newsroom, none.
In 95, I was going into 3rd grade.
Well, at least it's a story you're not going to forget anytime soon.
Tyler Mickelson works the same daybreak shift in the same studio Jodi used to.
Specifically, though, when you hit that anniversary of when she disappeared, crossing the street in the darkness, you get into the door and you just kind of look outside and just kind of think, no suspects, no body, hardly any proof whatsoever. It's just, it seems almost surreal that so little has ever come forward about it.
Besides the personal belongings of Jodi Huisentruit found scattered at the scene, investigators also have a palm print on her car. So far, no matches.
I feel like if it were modern day and if it happened today, that the results would be different just because of technology, social media.
One thing is clear, if the abduction happened today, there's no guarantee she would have been found, but investigators would have had more instant leads.
At the time back in '95, Facebook was not in existence, Twitter was not in existence. Those are avenues now where we could look at someone's associates, who they've recently been in contact with. In addition, cell phone technology has advanced greatly, so it's much easier for us to track cell phone calls. And also there are a lot more video surveillance cameras in existence today than there were 20 years ago. 20 years later, leads still trickle in, a handful every month. More than a decade ago, a team of journalists and retired police officers formed the website findjodi.com, an information clearinghouse to accept and follow leads. Lately, they've asked Iowa investigators to re-examine a man who was in Mason City 20 years ago and now serving time for multiple rapes.
There's a wooded area I see on Google Maps north of town with a pond. Have you ever looked in there? You know, we'll get a lot of those type of leads.
Psychics still contact Mason City Police. Investigator Prohaska says he checks on all the tips: internet chatter, jailhouse talk, and lately,
there's some recent ones that I actually got some follow-up done.
Comparing Jodi Huisentruit's information with a database of unidentified women across the country.
Most cops don't know this, but there is a lot of unclaimed female Jane Does out there in the network, whether they're fractions of body parts or just simply DNAs, and that's all they have. So we try to compare what we have to all of those. Obviously, we have Jodi Huisentruit's information. We have her DNA, we have her fingerprints, and we have her dental records. We have the sources here to be able to rule out these type of leads that we get, which we get a significant amount of them.
Our collective reserve of hope in a case like this naturally dwindles after 20 years, but investigators see it differently.
There's always something that can be done. I mean, we've got people that look at it, and with Jodi's case, you know, having a fresh set of eyes look at the stuff that everybody else has done, because you don't want to be the guy that misses something. And then after a while, it's human nature. You have second doubts about your own ability. Like, what did I miss? What am I not seeing?
Jodi's mother never saw a resolution. She recently died at the age of 91. Her sister Joanne carries the torch now.
She had a bright future. We were so looking forward to her reaching her goals and her achievements. So that's tough. When I look at that, I sit and cry.
They use that word a lot, closure, and for Jodi's family, I can't believe there's any such thing. You know, after having a wound fester for 20 years, how do you close that up just immediately? Where I work now in Mason City, I can look out my office and I can see the tree that we planted for Jodi, and so it's a reminder for me every day of what happened 20 years ago. And So it still is very close. It still is very fresh.
Next to the tree outside the Iowa TV station is a stone marker with engravings of two of Jodi Huisentruit's passions, a golf ball and a news camera. Her voice silenced, her story without an ending.